You ever have someone waltz into your life, acting like they owned everything you've worked for, down to the creaky floorboards under your feet? Yeah, that was Karen and her husband Greg, my new neighbors who decided my house, the one I've owned for a decade, was somehow their personal kingdom. Buckle up, because this is the story of how I, a perfectly reasonable guy with a knack for petty revenge, made them regret that delusion. Let's set the scene. I'm Jake, 34, a freelance graphic designer who's poured every spare dime into my cozy two-story fixer-upper in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. It's not a mansion, but it's mine, complete with a backyard I've turned into a mini jungle of tomatoes, basil, and a slightly wonky koi pond I built after one too many YouTube tutorials. I'm not a confrontational guy. I'd rather sip coffee and mock bad logos on Reddit than argue with anyone. But Karen and Greg, they brought out the strategist in me, the guy who'd rather outsmart you than outshout you. It all started last spring, when the moving truck rolled into the house next door. I was pruning my roses. Yes, I'm that guy now, when Karen emerged, her blonde bob so stiff it could have doubled as a helmet. She had that, "I need to speak to the manager," vibe before she even opened her mouth. Greg, her husband, trailed behind, a lanky guy in a polo shirt, clutching a clipboard like it was his life's mission. They were the kind of couple who looked like they'd sue a lemonade stand for serving too much ice. I waved, because I'm neighborly like that, but Karen just gave me a squinting once over, like I was a stray dog who'd wandered onto her street. "Nice place," I called out, gesturing to their new house. Karen's lips twitched into what I can only describe as a smirk dipped in lemon juice. "Oh, we know," she said, her voice dripping with the confidence of someone who's never doubted themselves in their life. "We've got big plans for this area." Greg nodded, scribbling something on his clipboard. I should have known then that this area didn't just mean their property. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first hint of trouble came a week later. I was in my backyard, grilling burgers for a small barbecue with my buddy Mike, when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone clearing their throat like they were auditioning for a soap opera. There was Karen, standing at the edge of my lawn, arms crossed, her designer sunglasses perched on her nose like a crown. Greg hovered behind her, still clutching that damn clipboard. "Excuse me," Karen said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Your fence is on our property line." I blinked, burger spatula in hand, grease dripping onto my sneakers. My fence, a sturdy wooden thing I'd installed 5 years ago after getting a proper survey, suddenly belonged to them? I laughed, thinking it was a joke. No, that's my fence. I've got the paperwork to prove it." Karen's smile was the kind you'd see on a shark before it bites. "We had a survey done," she said, as Greg waved his clipboard like it was the Declaration of Independence. "Your fence is 6 inches over the line. We'll need it moved by next week." I stared, waiting for the punchline. None came. Mike, who'd been flipping burgers, snorted so loud I thought he'd choke. "6 inches?" he muttered. "Lady, you need a hobby." I kept my cool, mostly because I didn't want my burgers to burn. "I'll check my records," I said, forcing a smile. "But I'm pretty sure this is my land." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she muttered something about entitled renters before storming off, Greg trailing like a loyal puppy. "Renters? I own this place outright. Paid off the mortgage last year after a particularly good client gig." But that word, renters, stuck in my craw. It was the first clue that Karen and Greg weren't just annoying. They were delusional. Over the next few days, I dug out my property deed and survey from the filing cabinet in my home office. The papers were clear. My fence was exactly where it should be, down to the centimeter. I even had photos from the installation, complete with the surveyor's markers. Feeling smug, I emailed a polite but firm message to Karen and Greg, attaching the documents. "Here's the proof," I wrote. "Let me know if you need anything else." I figured that'd be the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. The next morning, I woke to the sound of metal clanging in my backyard. I stumbled outside in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, to find Greg with a shovel, digging up my flower beds near the fence. Karen stood nearby, directing him like a drill sergeant. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled, sloshing coffee onto my slippers. Karen turned, unfazed. "We're marking our property," she said, as if I'd asked her the weather. Greg, red-faced and sweating, pointed to a shiny new stake he'd hammered into my petunias. "This is our land now," he said, like he was claiming the moon. I was too stunned to laugh. My flower beds, which I'd spent months coaxing into bloom, were now a muddy mess. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of sarcasm I could muster. "Wow, Greg, didn't know you were auditioning for Vikings. Mind telling me why you're destroying my garden?" Karen stepped forward, her voice icy. "Your so-called survey is outdated. Our surveyor says this is ours, and we're taking it back. You'll get a bill for the damages to our land." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on, doubled-over cackle. Damages? To their land? These two had just upgraded from annoying to certifiable. I told them to get off my property before I called the cops. Karen scoffed, muttering about squatters as they retreated. But as they walked away, I noticed Greg's clipboard had a map pinned to it. A map that looked suspiciously like my house's layout. That's when I realized this wasn't just about 6 inches of dirt. Karen and Greg weren't just after my fence. They thought they owned my entire damn house. I stood there, coffee cold, petunias ruined, a slow burn of anger building in my chest. If Karen and Greg wanted a war, they'd get one. I wasn't about to let two entitled weirdos with a clipboard steal my home. Time to get creative. So, there I was, standing in my trampled flower beds, coffee mug as cold as my growing hatred for Karen and Greg. These two clipboard-wielding lunatics thought they could just claim my house, like it was a Black Friday deal at Walmart. My first instinct was to march over and shove their precious survey map where the sun doesn't shine, but I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who smiles, nods, and then spends 3 hours researching property law like it's my new religion. Karen and Greg were about to learn that Jake doesn't lose his house to a couple of suburban conquistadors. I spent that afternoon in my home office, a cluttered cave of sketch pads and empty energy drink cans, digging deeper into my property records. My deed was ironclad, signed and notarized in 2015 when I bought the place. The survey, done by a licensed professional, showed my fence was exactly where it belonged. But that map on Greg's clipboard nagged at me. It wasn't just a property line sketch. It had my house's footprint, down to the weird L-shaped porch I'd added 2 years ago. How the hell did they get that? I fired off a text to Mike, my burger-flipping buddy from the barbecue. "You know anyone who does shady surveys?" I asked. Mike, who works construction and knows every sketchy contractor in a 50-mile radius, replied, "Yeah, probably Tony the Hack. Guy'll draw you a map saying you own the White House for $500. Great. Karen and Greg had hired a discount cartographer to fuel their delusion. I decided to play nice for now. I printed out my deed, survey, and photos, stuffed them into a manila folder, and marched over to their house. A McMansion with so many fake columns, it looked like a rejected Parthenon. Karen answered the door, her face a mask of smugness, like she'd already mentally redecorated my living room. "Here's the documentation," I said, handing her the folder with a grin so fake it hurt. "This proves the fence and the house are mine. Let's clear this up." Greg appeared behind her, clipboard in hand, because of course it was. He flipped through my papers like he was grading a middle school book report, then handed them back. "This doesn't change anything," he said, adjusting his glasses with the confidence of a man who's never been punched. "Our survey is more recent. You'll need to vacate the disputed area." Vacate? Disputed area? I was standing on my own porch, and this guy was telling me to pack my bags. I laughed, because what else do you do when someone's this far gone? "Greg, buddy, the only thing I'm vacating is this conversation. That's my house. I own it. End of story." Karen stepped forward, her voice low and venomous. "We've already contacted our lawyer," she said. "You're squatting on our property, and we'll prove it in court." I blinked. Court? These two were ready to sue me over a fantasy. I tipped an imaginary hat. "Good luck with that," I said, walking away before I said something that'd get me arrested. Back home, I poured a whiskey and called my old college roommate, Sarah, who's now a real estate lawyer with a knack for shredding entitled idiots. "Sounds like you've got a Karen and Greg problem," she said, chuckling. "Send me everything you've got. I'll check the county records and see what's up with their so-called survey. While Sarah worked her magic, I decided to do some recon. Karen and Greg weren't just annoying, they were organized. That map meant they'd planned this, and I needed to know how deep their crazy went. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a chainsaw. Not the neighbor trimming a tree kind, but the someone's committing a felony kind. I bolted outside to find Greg, in khakis and a sweat-soaked polo, sawing at my fence like he was auditioning for a horror movie. Karen stood nearby, filming on her phone, probably for their inevitable were the victim's social media post. My poor fence, a labor of love I'd stained myself, was half collapsed, splinters everywhere. "Are you insane?" I shouted, storm lock forward, her sunglasses glinting like a supervillain's lair. "We're reclaiming our property," she said. "You were warned." I grabbed my phone and started filming too, because two could play that game. "Smile, Karen," I said, zooming in. "This'll look great in court." I called the cops. Not because I wanted to, but because Greg was one bad swing away from taking out my mailbox. 2 officers showed up, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I showed them my deed and survey, while Karen waved her phone, claiming she had proof of ownership. The cops, clearly over it, told everyone to stop touching the fence and sort it out legally. As they left, Karen leaned in, her voice a hiss. "This isn't over. We've got connections." "Connections? In our sleepy suburb?" I almost laughed, but the sight of my mangled fence kept me sober. This was war now. That night, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not mailed, just shoved in there. It was from K&G Properties LLC, demanding I vacate my house within 30 days or face a lawsuit. The letterhead looked like it was designed in Microsoft Word by someone who'd just discovered clip art. But the threat was real, and it lit a fire under me. Sarah called back with news. The county had no record of any recent survey for Karen and Greg's property, and my deed was clean. But she'd found something else, a lien filed against my house by K&G Properties, claiming I owed them for unpaid property fees. Fees for what? Existing? I was livid, but Sarah was calm. "This is fraud," she said. "We'll bury them. Start gathering evidence." I spent the next day installing security cameras around my house, the kind with night vision and cloud storage. If Karen and Greg wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. As I mounted the last camera, I caught Greg staring from his driveway, clipboard in hand, scribbling furiously. I waved, all teeth and sarcasm. "Hope you're writing my Oscar acceptance speech, Greg." He scurried inside. Round 1 was mine, but I knew they'd come back swinging. Time to get creative and a little ruthless. If you'd told me a month ago I'd be installing security cameras to fend off neighbors who thought they owned my house, I'd have laughed and handed you my whiskey. But here I was, wiring up my last camera, watching Greg scuttle back to his McMansion like a roach caught in a spotlight. Karen and Greg's latest stunt, filing a fraudulent lien against my house, had me seeing red, but I wasn't about to let these clipboard crusaders win. I'm Jake, the guy who'd rather design a killer logo than a vendetta, but mess with my home, and I'll channel Sun Tzu with a side of petty. With my cameras up, I felt like I was starring in my own low-budget spy flick. I checked the footage, crystal clear, catching every blade of grass in my yard and the smug glint in Karen's sunglasses from her porch. Sarah, my lawyer friend, was already building a case to squash their lien like a bug. "This K&G Properties LLC is a shell company," she told me over the phone, her voice crackling with glee. "Registered 2 months ago, no assets, just Karen and Greg's names. It's a scam, Jake. We'll nail them for fraud." I grinned, imagining Karen's face when she realized her word art letterhead wouldn't hold up in court. But I wasn't waiting for the law to catch up. I needed to know what these lunatics were planning next. The next morning, I woke to a new surprise, a bright orange notice taped to my front door. It screamed, "Eviction warning," in Comic Sans, because of course it was Comic Sans. The notice, from K&G Properties, claimed I had 15 days to vacate their property or face legal enforcement. I snorted so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Legal enforcement? These two couldn't enforce a parking ticket. But the audacity, the sheer, unhinged gall, had me equal parts furious and impressed. I snapped a photo and sent it to Sarah, who replied, "This is gold. Keep everything. They're digging their own grave." I decided it was time to turn the tables. Karen and Greg thought they could intimidate me with fake notices and a chainsaw. Fine. I'd play their game, but smarter. I called Mike, who showed up with his pickup truck and a grin that said he was ready for chaos. "What's the plan, General?" he asked, cracking his knuckles. I handed him a stack of neon green flyers I designed overnight. They read, "Property Scam Alert. Beware of K&G Properties, LLC. Contact the county clerk for real ownership records." I'd included my deed's public record number and a QR code linking to the county website. "We're papering the neighborhood," I said. "Let's see how Karen likes a taste of public shame." We spent the afternoon tucking flyers under doormats and in mailboxes, avoiding Karen and Greg's house to keep it deniable. The cul-de-sac buzzed as neighbors whispered over their hedges. Mrs. Patel, who lived across the street and baked killer samosas, pulled me aside. "Is this about those new people?" she asked, eyeing the flyer. "They told me they're managing the whole street now." Managing? I laughed, but my stomach twisted. These two weren't just after my house. They were trying to con the entire neighborhood. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret those flyers." No signature, but I could practically smell Karen's lavender perfume through the screen. I saved the text and added it to my growing evidence folder. Then I checked my cameras, and jackpot. The footage showed Greg sneaking onto my porch at 3 a.m., taping up the eviction notice like a budget ninja. His clipboard was tucked under his arm, because apparently he slept with it. I emailed the clip to Sarah, who replied, "Trespassing and fraud? They're making this too easy." But Karen and Greg weren't done. The next day, I came home from a grocery run to find my driveway blocked by a tow truck. A burly guy in a greasy jacket was hooking up my car, while Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, looking like she'd just won an Oscar for ethics. "What's this?" I demanded, dropping my grocery bags. The tow guy shrugged. "Got a call about an illegally parked vehicle." "Illegally parked?" "In my own driveway." I turned to Karen, who didn't even blink. "This is our property," she said, her voice smooth as a used car salesman's. "You can't park here anymore." I laughed, because what else do you do when someone's this delusional? "Karen, you're towing my car from my driveway on my land. You sure you want to play this game?" The tow guy, sensing drama he wasn't paid for, unhooked my car and drove off, muttering about crazy neighbors. Karen's face turned the color of her overpriced handbag, but she didn't back down. "We've reported you to the HOA, she hissed. "They'll fine you for this." "The HOA? Our neighborhood didn't even have one." I leaned in, all smiles. "Karen, the only thing getting fined here is your ego. Keep this up, and you'll need a new hobby, maybe prison crafts." She stormed off, leaving me to drag my groceries inside, adrenaline pumping. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping whiskey and scrolling through the neighborhood's group chat, which was blowing up. Mrs. Patel had posted my flyer, and people were pissed. Turns out, Karen and Greg had been knocking on doors, claiming they were overseeing property compliance and demanding fees from half the street. My flyers had lit a match, and the cul-de-sac was ready to burn. I grinned, but a chill ran through me. Karen and Greg weren't just entitled. They were running a full-on scam, and I was their main target. Time to step up my game before they did something worse than a tow truck. You know that moment when you realize your neighbors aren't just annoying, but possibly unhinged enough to star in a true crime podcast? That was me, Jake, sitting on my porch, whiskey in hand, watching the neighborhood group chat explode over Karen and Greg's fake property empire. These two had gone from chainsawing my fence to trying to tow my car, and now they were scamming the whole cul-de-sac with their K&G Properties nonsense. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was the unofficial general of a suburban rebellion. And let me tell you, I was ready to lean into the chaos with a smirk and a plan. The morning after the tow truck fiasco, I woke to the smell of burnt toast and the sound of my phone buzzing like an angry hornet. The group chat was on fire. Neighbors posting screenshots of letters from K&G Properties, all demanding compliance fees for nonsense like unapproved mailbox colors or excessive lawn growth. Mrs. Patel, bless her, had rallied the troops, sharing my flyer and urging everyone to check their deeds. I grinned, toasting my coffee mug to her. Karen and Greg had poked the wrong beehive, and I was about to make sure they got stung. I called Sarah, my lawyer friend, who was practically cackling. "Their lien on your house is a joke," she said. "It's already under review for fraud, but I found something else. K&G Properties tried to file claims on 3 other houses in your neighborhood. The county rejected them, but they're still sending out notices." 3 other houses? These 2 weren't just delusional. They were running a full-on grift. Sarah promised to escalate the fraud case, but warned me, "They're desperate now. Watch your back." I hung up, feeling the kind of thrill you get when you know you're about to outsmart someone who thinks they're untouchable. My next move was pure pettiness, inspired by a late-night Reddit scroll. I ordered a custom vinyl banner online, rush delivery, that read, "This house is mine. Check your deeds. Jake, actual owner." I hung it across my garage, big enough to be seen from space, or at least from Karen's front porch. By noon, neighbors were snapping photos, and the group chat lit up with clapping emojis. Mr. Nguyen, who lived 2 doors down and once gave me his secret faux recipe, stopped by to high-five me. "You're crazy, Jake," he said, laughing. "But I like it." I winked. Crazy's what it takes to beat crazy. Of course, Karen and Greg didn't take kindly to my banner. That afternoon, I caught them on my cameras, standing in their driveway, Karen gesturing wildly at my house while Greg scribbled on his clipboard like a man possessed. I zoomed in on the footage, half expecting to see "Evil Plan Number 47" written in crayon. Instead, I saw Karen pull out her phone and start typing furiously. Minutes later, my phone pinged with an email from K&G Properties LLC, threatening a defamation lawsuit over my slanderous banner. Defamation? For stating a fact? I forwarded it to Sarah, who replied, "They're spiraling. Keep pushing." I decided to push harder. I printed more flyers, this time with a photo of my deed's public record and a bolded warning. K&G Properties is not registered with the county. Protect your home. Mike and I hit the streets again, taping them to every lamppost and mailbox in a 2-block radius. As we worked, I noticed Karen's car, a shiny SUV that screamed midlife crisis, tailing us slowly. I waved, all teeth and sarcasm. "Taking notes for your next scam, Karen?" I called. She sped off, but not before I caught her glaring like I'd stolen her last kale smoothie. The next day, things got weirder. I came home to find my backyard gate wide open and my koi pond trashed, plants uprooted, water murky, my poor fish swimming in circles like they'd seen a ghost. My cameras caught the culprit, Greg, sneaking in at dawn with a rake, stirring up the pond like he was auditioning for Swamp Thing. I was livid, but also weirdly impressed by their commitment to being the worst. I saved the footage and called the cops again, who sighed like they were tired of my address. "We'll talk to them," the officer said, "but you need to take this to court." I nodded, already plotting. That evening, I hosted an impromptu neighborhood meeting in my backyard. Mrs. Patel brought samosas, Mr. Nguyen brought beer, and Mike brought his knack for stirring the pot. 10 neighbors showed up, all with stories of Karen and Greg's property management threats. One guy, Tom, said they tried to fine him $200 for his kid's trampoline. They said it was on their land, he fumed. "My house is 3 lots away." We agreed to pool our evidence, letters, emails, photos, and hand it over to Sarah. As we toasted to sticking it to the scammers, I felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just my fight anymore. But Karen and Greg weren't done. The next morning, I found a new notice on my door, this time from a law firm I'd never heard of, demanding I cease harassing K&G Properties or face immediate legal action. The letterhead was so poorly formatted it looked like Greg had typed it during a lunch break. I laughed, but a knot formed in my gut. These 2 were escalating, and I had a feeling their next move would be bigger and dirtier than a trash koi pond. I tightened my camera's angles and called Sarah. It was time to go on the offensive. You ever get that feeling where you're one step away from either winning a war or starring in a true crime documentary? That was me, Jake, sipping coffee on my porch, my "This House Is Mine" banner flapping in the breeze like a middle finger to Karen and Greg. Their latest stunt, trashing my koi pond and slapping me with a fake lawyer's letter, had the neighborhood buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. My backyard meeting had turned our cul-de-sac into a coalition of the pissed off, and I was ready to crank the pressure on these clipboard-wielding con artists. But Karen and Greg, they were about to prove they had one brain cell left, and it was working overtime. The morning after our neighborhood powwow, I checked my security cameras, expecting to see Greg skulking around with his trusty clipboard. Instead, I got something better. Footage of Karen at 2 a.m., sneaking into my yard with a can of spray paint, defacing my banner with squatter in neon red. She looked like a discount Banksy, her bob bouncing as she scurried away. I saved the clip, cackling so hard I spilled my coffee. Vandalism? Really, Karen? I forwarded the footage to Sarah, who replied, "This is a gift. Keep baiting them. They're imploding." Oh, I planned to. But first, I needed to know how deep their scam ran. I spent the day digging online, channeling my inner detective. A quick search on K&G Properties LLC turned up a bare-bones website with stock photos and a contact form that probably went straight to Karen's Gmail. But a deeper dive into public records revealed gold. Karen and Greg had tried this scam before, in a town 2 counties over. They'd bullied a retiree into paying fees for a fake lien, only to back off when the guy's son threatened a lawsuit. The pattern was clear. They preyed on people who wouldn't fight back. Too bad for them. I'm the guy who'd rather spend a weekend reading property law than let a Karen steal my mailbox. Armed with this, I decided to escalate my psychological warfare. I ordered a second banner, this one reading, K&G Properties equals scam. Check county records. I hung it next to the defaced one, because nothing says, "I'm not scared," like doubling down. By noon, neighbors were snapping selfies with it, and the group chat was a sea of fire emojis. Mrs. Patel dropped off a plate of samosas with a note. "Give him hell, Jake." I was munching on one when I noticed a fancy black sedan parked in front of Karen's house. Out stepped a guy in a cheap suit, shaking Greg's hand like they were old golf buddies. My gut screamed, "Shady lawyer," so I zoomed in with my camera. Sure enough, the guy's briefcase had a logo matching the law firm from their latest letter. Game on. I called Sarah, who was already drafting a cease and desist letter for the lien and vandalism. "That lawyer's probably a friend doing them a favor," she said. "I'll check his credentials, but you need to keep the neighborhood hot. The more pressure, the sloppier they get." I took her advice and organized a second meeting, this time at Mrs. Patel's house. 15 neighbors showed up, bringing more stories. Karen had told Tom his kid's treehouse was illegal, and Greg had tried to charge Mr. Nguyen for unauthorized fence repairs. We pooled our evidence, letters, photos, even a recording of Karen yelling at a teenager about her bike rack. I felt like the ringleader of a suburban mafia, and I was here for it. The next day, things got wilder. I came home to find a for sale sign in my front yard, complete with a K&G Properties logo and a phone number I didn't recognize. My jaw hit the pavement. These lunatics were trying to sell my house. I yanked the sign out, nearly pulling a muscle, and stormed inside to check my cameras. Sure enough, Greg had planted it at dawn, looking shadier than a used car salesman in a rainstorm. I called Sarah, who laughed so hard she snorted. "This is fraud on steroids," she said. "File a police report, and I'll get an emergency injunction to stop them." I did, and the cops, now on a first-name basis with me, promised to pay Karen and Greg a visit. But the cherry on this dumpster fire came that evening. I was grilling steaks when I heard a commotion outside. Peeking through my window, I saw Karen, Greg, and their sketchy lawyer friend arguing in their driveway. Karen's arms flailed like she was conducting an orchestra of rage, while Greg clutched his clipboard like a security blanket. The lawyer guy kept shaking his head, clearly regretting his life choices. I grabbed my phone and recorded it, zooming in on Karen's face as she shrieked, "We own this street." I snorted. Own the street? She couldn't even own a decent haircut. The neighborhood was now a powder keg, and my banners were the spark. The group chat buzzed with plans for a community watch to catch Karen and Greg in the act. Tom offered to patrol with his drone, and Mrs. Patel was ready to weaponize her samosas. I loved it, but I knew Karen and Greg wouldn't go down without a fight. Their for sale sign was a desperate move, and desperate people do stupid things. I tightened my cameras, backed up my evidence to the cloud, and poured another whiskey. The war was far from over, but I was ready to make them regret ever stepping foot on my lawn. You know you're in deep when your neighbors try to sell your house out from under you, and your response is to pour a whiskey and plot like you're in a suburban Ocean's 11. I'm Jake, the guy who just wanted to grill steaks and grow tomatoes, now leading a neighborhood revolt against Karen and Greg, the Bonnie and Clyde of fake property deeds. Their latest stunt, planting a for sale sign in my yard, had me torn between laughter and rage. But with my cameras rolling, the neighborhood on my side, and Sarah, my lawyer friend, building a fraud case, I was ready to turn their scam into a cautionary tale. Spoiler, they weren't going to like the ending. The morning after I caught Karen and Greg's driveway meltdown on camera, I woke to a new kind of chaos. An email from a real estate agent named Linda, asking if I was serious about listing my house with K&G Properties. Attached was a listing agreement with my address, forged with a signature that looked like Greg tried to mimic my handwriting after one too many energy drinks. I stared at my laptop, coffee going cold, and laughed so hard my dog barked in alarm. These two weren't just scammers. They were the kind of amateurs who'd get caught stealing cookies from a jar labeled evidence. I forwarded the email to Sarah, who replied, "This is felony-level fraud. I'm filing for an injunction today." I leaned back, grinning. Karen and Greg were about to learn what happens when you poke a graphic designer with a law degree in his corner. But I wasn't content to sit back and let Sarah do all the heavy lifting. I decided to crank up the heat. I printed a new batch of flyers, this time with a screenshot of the for sale sign and a bolded headline. K&G Properties is trying to sell your home. Check your deeds now. I added a link to a Google Doc I'd set up, where neighbors could upload their own shady K&G letters. Mike and I hit the streets again, taping flyers to every stop sign and mailbox we could find. As we worked, I noticed a familiar black sedan cruising by, the shady lawyer from yesterday. He slowed down, glaring, and I gave him a wave so cheerful it probably ruined his day. "Nice car, buddy," I called. "Hope it's paid for." He sped off, and Mike high-fived me. "You're gonna give them a heart attack," he said. I shrugged. "Good. Saves me the legal fees." By afternoon, the neighborhood was a full-on war zone. The group chat was flooded with photos of K&G notices, and Tom's drone had caught Greg sneaking into another neighbor's yard, measuring their fence with a tape measure like he was Christopher Columbus claiming a new continent. Mrs. Patel organized a petition to the county, demanding an investigation into K&G Properties, and got 20 signatures in an hour. I was proud, but a little nervous. Karen and Greg were cornered, and cornered rats bite. Sure enough, that evening, I got a knock on my door. It was the shady lawyer, Mr. Cheap Suit himself, holding a cease and desist letter thicker than a phone book. "You're slandering my clients," he said, puffing out his chest. I smirked, leaning against my doorframe. "Slander? Nah, I'm just stating facts. Like how your clients tried to sell my house. Want to see the footage?" His face went pale, and he muttered something about court before scurrying off. I sent the encounter to Sarah, who texted back, "He's not even licensed in this state. We've got them." The next day, things took a darker turn. I was in my backyard, fixing my koi pond, still a mess from Greg's rake rampage, when I heard a loud thud from my front yard. I ran out to find my mailbox smashed to bits, tire tracks gouged into my lawn. My cameras caught it. Karen's SUV peeling out at 4 a.m., with her behind the wheel, looking like she was auditioning for Mad Max, Fury Road. I saved the footage, my blood boiling. This wasn't just a scam anymore. It was personal. I called the cops, who were now so familiar with my address they probably had it on speed dial. They took a report, but warned me, without a clear shot of her face, it's hard to prove. I gritted my teeth. Fine. If the law was slow, I'd speed things up. I decided to go nuclear, metaphorically, for now. I designed a website called StopKandGScams.com, uploading all our evidence, my deed, the forged listing agreement, camera footage, and neighbor testimonies. I shared the link in the group chat, and by evening, it had 200 hits. Mr. Nguyen even posted it on a local Reddit thread, where it blew up with comments like, "These people are insane," and "Jake's a legend." I was flattered, but I knew Karen and Greg wouldn't take this lying down. Sure enough, that night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Take down the site, or you'll regret it." I laughed, saving it for Sarah. Regret? The only thing I regretted was not planting more cameras. The next morning, I woke to a crowd outside my house. Neighbors, not pitchforks, thankfully. Mrs. Patel was leading a group of 10, holding a sign that read "Stop K and G Fraud." They'd organized a protest, marching up and down the street, chanting loud enough to wake half the county. I joined them, holding a megaphone Mike had borrowed from his construction site. "Karen and Greg, come out and face us," I shouted, half expecting them to hide. But there was Karen, standing on her porch, arms crossed, her face redder than her spray-painted squatter. Greg peeked out from behind a curtain, clipboard nowhere in sight. The crowd cheered, and I felt a rush. This was it, the moment we'd turn their scam into a neighborhood legend. But I knew better than to think they'd surrender. Karen's glare said one thing: this was about to get uglier. There's a special kind of thrill when you're leading a neighborhood rebellion against two scammers who think they can steal your house with a clipboard and a bad attitude. I'm Jake, the guy who just wanted to tend my koi pond and mock bad fonts, now megaphone in hand, facing down Karen and Greg as our cul-de-sac turned into a protest zone. With my StopKandGscams.com website going viral and Sarah, my lawyer friend, ready to bury them in court, I thought we had the upper hand. But Karen and Greg, like roaches in a nuclear apocalypse, weren't going down without a fight. And their next move? Let's just say it was the kind of stupid that deserves its own Reddit thread. The morning after our street protest, I woke to the sound of hammering. Not the neighbor building a deck kind, but the someone's committing a felony kind. I stumbled outside, still in my pajamas, to find Greg nailing a new sign into my front yard. Property of K and G Properties LLC. Trespassers will be prosecuted. My jaw dropped. These lunatics weren't just doubling down. They were sprinting towards self-destruction with a smile. I grabbed my phone, filming as Greg hammered away, his polo shirt soaked with sweat. "Morning, Greg," I called, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Adding vandal to your resume?" He froze, dropped the hammer, and bolted back to his McMansion. I yanked the sign out, adding it to my evidence pile, and sent the footage to Sarah. She replied, "They're begging for jail at this point." The neighborhood was now a full-on circus. My website had hit 1,000 views overnight, thanks to Reddit and Mrs. Patel sharing it on every local Facebook group. Neighbors were emailing me scans of their own K and G letters, each more absurd than the last. Tom got one demanding $500 for unauthorized tree pruning. Mr. Nguyen was fined for his excessive holiday lights from last Christmas. I was starting to think Karen and Greg had a dartboard with our names on it, picking targets at random. But their focus on me, my house, my car, my mailbox, felt personal. I wasn't just a target, I was their white whale. And I was ready to harpoon them. I decided to crank the pressure to 11. I contacted a local reporter, Emma, who'd seen my website on Reddit and was itching for a juicy story. Over coffee at my place, served with Mrs. Patel's samosas, I laid out everything. The fake lien, the forged listing agreement, the trashed mailbox, and Greg's early morning hammer fest. Emma's eyes lit up like she'd just found the scoop of the century. "This is gold," she said, scribbling notes. "Can I get your neighbor's statements?" I grinned. "Bring a notebook. They're ready to talk." By that afternoon, Emma was interviewing half the cul-de-sac, while Tom's drone buzzed overhead, filming Karen and Greg's house for context. Karen stood on her porch, glaring, but didn't dare approach. For once, Greg's clipboard was nowhere in sight. That evening, Sarah called with big news. "The county's launching a fraud investigation into K and G Properties," she said. "Your website and the neighbors' complaints tipped them off. And that shady lawyer? He's not licensed here, just like I thought. He's facing his own ethics probe." I pumped my fist, nearly knocking over my whiskey. But Sarah wasn't done. There's more. I traced K&G Properties to a P.O. box linked to another scam in Ohio. These two have a history. Ohio? I laughed, imagining Karen and Greg as the world's worst Bonnie and Clyde, scamming their way across the Midwest with nothing but a clipboard and bad letterhead. But Karen and Greg had one last card to play. The next day, I came home to find a crowd outside my house, not neighbors, but a group of strangers, cameras in hand, poking around my yard. A woman in a blazer, holding a clipboard, because of course, introduced herself as a property inspector hired by K&G Properties to assess the premises. I snorted. Assess what? My tomatoes. She stammered, clearly unprepared for pushback, and handed me a business card that looked like it was printed at a gas station. My cameras caught everything, including Greg lurking in his driveway, watching like a kid who'd just set off a firecracker. I told the inspector to get lost or I'd call the cops, and she scurried off with her entourage. I sent the footage to Emma, who was now working on a full exposé for the local paper. That night, the neighborhood threw an impromptu barbecue at Mr. Nguyen's place, a middle finger to Karen and Greg's chaos. As we grilled and swapped stories, Mike pulled me aside. Tom's drone caught something weird, he said, showing me his phone. The footage showed Karen and Greg loading boxes into their SUV at 3 a.m., looking like they were prepping for a midnight getaway. My gut twisted. Were they running? I texted Sarah, who replied, if they skip town, they're admitting guilt. Keep the cameras on. I nodded, sipping my beer, the taste bitter with anticipation. Karen and Greg were on the ropes, but I knew they'd try one last desperate stunt. I was ready to make sure it backfired spectacularly. You ever feel like you're one step from victory, but the universe might still have a plot twist up its sleeve? That was me, Jake, standing in my backyard, sipping a beer after a neighborhood barbecue, knowing Karen and Greg were packing their SUV like they were fleeing a zombie apocalypse. My StopKandGscams.com website had gone viral. The county was investigating their fraud, and Emma's exposé was about to hit the local paper. I turned our cul-de-sac into a rebellion, and with Sarah, my lawyer friend, ready to bury them in court. I thought I had these clipboard-wielding con artists cornered. But Karen and Greg, they had one last, desperate play, and I was ready to make sure it was their final flop. The morning after Tom's drone caught their late-night packing, I woke to an eerie quiet. No hammering, no fake signs, just the hum of my koi pond filter, finally back in working order. I checked my cameras. Karen and Greg's SUV was gone, their McMansion dark. I texted Mike, who was already on it, scoping their driveway with Tom's drone. Looks like they bolted, he said. Garage is empty. I grinned, but my gut twisted. Scammers like them don't just vanish, they regroup. I called Sarah, who was already on the phone with the county. Their LLC's assets are frozen, she said. If they're running, they're doing it broke. But stay sharp, they might try something stupid. Stupid was right. That afternoon, I got a call from Emma, the reporter, her voice buzzing with excitement. Check your email, she said. You're gonna love this. I opened my laptop to find a draft of her exposé, titled Suburban Scammers: How K&G Properties Tried to Steal a Neighborhood. It detailed their fake liens, forged documents, and Ohio scam history, with quotes from me, Mrs. Patel, and half the cul-de-sac. But the kicker? A leaked email from Greg to his shady lawyer, admitting they'd fabricated the survey to pressure squatters. I laughed so hard my dog hid under the couch. This was checkmate. Or so I thought. Around dusk, I heard a car pull up. Peeking out, I saw Karen's SUV back in their driveway, followed by a beat-up van with property management slapped on the side. Out stepped Karen, Greg, and a new guy, burly, with a neck tattoo and a toolbox that screamed hired muscle. My cameras caught them heading straight for my backyard, Karen pointing like a general ordering a siege. I grabbed my megaphone, yes, I kept it, and stormed outside. Evening, folks, I shouted, voice echoing. Planning to steal my tomatoes now. The neighbors, alerted by the group chat, started gathering, phones out, filming. Karen spun around, her face a mix of rage and panic. This is our property, she shrieked, waving a new stack of papers. We're taking possession tonight. Greg, clutching his clipboard like a lifeline, nodded, while Neck Tattoo cracked his knuckles. I laughed, loud and sharp. Karen, the only thing you're taking is a one-way ticket to court. Smile for the cameras. I pointed to my security cams, then to Mrs. Patel and Tom, both filming. Neck Tattoo hesitated, clearly not paid enough for this. The neighbors started chanting, "Scammers! Scammers!" And I saw Greg's knees wobble. That's when the cops rolled up, 3 cars, lights flashing, probably sick of my address, but ready for action. Sarah had tipped them off, having filed an emergency injunction that morning. The officers, led by my now familiar friend Officer Daniels, approached Karen's crew. "Step away from the property," Daniels said, eyeing Neck Tattoo. Karen tried her usual spiel, waving her papers, but Daniels cut her off. "We've got a warrant for your arrest. Fraud, trespassing, and vandalism." Greg dropped his clipboard, and I swear I heard it cry. Karen's face went white, but she still muttered about her rights as they cuffed her. The aftermath was glorious. Emma's expose hit the presses the next day, front page news, with a photo of my banner and a headline that made me cackle. Neighborhood fights back against property scam. Karen and Greg were charged with multiple counts of fraud and trespassing, their shady lawyer disbarred for good measure. The county voided their fake liens, and K&G Properties LLC was dissolved faster than my patience. Neighbors threw a block party, with Mrs. Patel's samosas and Mr. Nguyen's beer flowing freely. I stood on my porch, toasting the crowd, my banners still up like war trophies. But the best part? A week later, I got a letter from Karen, postmarked from jail. It was an apology, scrawled in shaky handwriting, begging me to drop the charges because we didn't mean it. I framed it next to my deed, a reminder that nobody messes with my house. As I sipped whiskey, watching my koi swim in their pristine pond, I smirked. Karen and Greg thought they owned my home, but I owned their downfall. And damn, it felt good. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.